This is the Your Money Hour podcast. I am your host, Dakota. Hey, y'all. Thank you for joining me today, no matter where you are, California, Ireland, Africa. Thank you all for joining me. So if you need help with your personal finances, I know it's summertime. People tend to take time off from their money, like to take time off for vacation. Not a good idea. Managing your coins is a year-round event. So if you need help with your finances, contact me today at dakotagready.com. Oh, and if you have a business and you need help with accounting and taxes, I got you covered there as well. For resources, go to the accounting tab on my website at dakotagready.com. So today I have Dr. Nika White. She is of Nika White Consulting in Greenville, South Carolina. Wanted to have her on today on the show to talk about herself and her book. So Dr. White, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm glad to have the opportunity.
Yes, ma'am. So tell everybody about who you are and what you do, Dr. White.
Sure, I'll be happy to. So Dr. Nika White, I'm based in Greenville, South Carolina. I am the founder and lead principal consultant for a full service DEI management consulting firm under my brand name, Nika White Consulting. And we intersect the work of diversity, equity, and inclusion with leadership in business, working with all types of clients, different industries, different sizes, helping those clients to effectively integrate into their business frameworks, strategic diversity, intentional inclusion, and a lens of equity. And I am super excited to be in conversation with you today. So thank you so much for inviting me.
Yes, ma'am. So how did you get in the DEI space? Talk about that.
Yeah. So my background is marketing communications, and I worked for an ad agency actually based in Greenville, South Carolina, but this ad agency also had a presence in New York. And when you think about the work of working within an ad agency, it's your role to be a smart marketing partner to your clients whose consumer constituencies represent not only diverse America, but global diversity. And so it was really important for all of those who are assembled to help provide some support services from a marketing communications perspective to bring that lens of DEI. And at the time, the agency that I was working for, DEI was non-existent. It wasn't really a conversation or even something that was part of the value sets. And I saw that as an opportunity. I was in between both the Greenville and the New York office, and I couldn't help but to notice the depth of diversity in the workforce within the office that was in New York. But unbeknown to me at the time, New York, the advertising capital of the world, was also equally challenged. It's just that they had a little bit of an advantage, just in that the city produces a lot more diversity, right? But I couldn't let that go. I love my field. I love the work of advertising, marketing, communications. It was always on time, on budget, on strategy. And I thought that I was going to be in that space for the long haul. And I remember one day sitting in my office and thinking, if I love this profession so much, why aren't there others who look like me that's also taking advantage of this career path? And I couldn't let that go. And so, Dakota, I went to the president CEO at the time, who was very hands-on. I had a great rapport with him, and I kind of shared this similar narrative. I knew that the big, hairy, audacious goal, the big hag, was to become the most admired agency. And I thought, well, why are we waiting for someone to knock on our door to place mandates, which is what was happening in New York? People were knocking on, like the Attorney General's office, were knocking on the doors of those agencies saying, you have to diversify. This is not a suggestion. It is a mandate. We'll be back in 6 months to see how you're doing. But no one was paying attention to, of course, the offices that were based in Greenville, South Carolina. So that was an opportunity. I shared my thoughts on how this really aligned with our vision and our mission and how it would make us smarter marketing partners. The president CEO listened intently. He asked very thought-provoking questions, and I was prepared for everything in that conversation, with the exception of, Nika, yes, we do need to be doing this. You're going to lead it. Now tell us how. So I had to get really smart really quick into immersing myself in this space. And that is really how it started. So I often say that the work found me. Although if I really take inventory of all of the things that I associate myself with then and now, it's always been there, just kind of hidden. And now I'm able to have it on full display.
So you saw a need in the market and you filled the gap. Sounds like to me.
I did. I saw a need. And that's important, Dakota, because I believe that there are a number of people that are desiring to be in different spaces, disciplines, and industries, and they're waiting for that pathway to be created for them. And I would just encourage folks to think about, raising your hand, taking the initiative, creating the opportunity for yourself, because especially when you think about the work of DEI, it really belongs to all of us. And all it takes is someone to be bold enough to say, we need to do this. I want to help lead it, help me to get positioned to be equipped to do so effectively, and let's create some success together.
So I'm in accounting and personal finance. So
Yeah.
most of those spaces are predominantly white as well. So my
Yes.
voice is like, honestly, it's a challenge because I mean, when I worked in accounting as an employee, I
Yeah.
was either the only Black man in the business, the only Black person in the business. So there were challenges as well, but I was in the space. I knew my stuff. I didn't know everything because I ain't God, but still I knew my stuff. I mean, I got the same degree that they got, so they can't really
Yeah.
say, all right, I'm better than you. So I guess I stood out because again, I was in the field, but now I have my
Mhm.
own business. It's totally different.
Yeah, so accounting, definitely, you're right. It is one of those spaces that's also challenged in terms of not having a fair representation or percentage of professionals of color. And sometimes I find that organizations or leaders in general will use that as a crutch or as an excuse. And I often say to make sure you're not doing that. I mean, right, we can recreate this narrative, right? It may take a little bit of intentionality and time and effort to make sure that we are exposing other people to this career path. The bottom line is that we tend to gravitate towards things that are already on our radar. And so there may be a number of people that could make for great accountants, right? That are, professionals of color or part of those underrepresented, or I like to say underestimated populations, but they just don't know how to break in, or maybe it's not even something that's in their consideration set because they don't know of anyone within their immediate circle or network that's in that space. And so I love the fact that you have this platform because I think it allows you to demonstrate that you are, a man of color that's operating in this space effectively. And hopefully maybe that's inspiring others. And I think that's a message for all of us that may find ourselves as professionals in spaces that are not well populated with underrepresented individuals.
So talk about how, in your opinion, if someone can't get at the table, create your
Mhm.
own table. Because
Yeah,
in my opinion, it's like, why go to somewhere where people don't want you to be? Why not go to create your
yeah.
own space and create so much buzz, attention, and say people can't help but to notice you?
Yeah, so there's been a lot of conversations I've been involved in that really addresses this question of why are we always asking for a seat at the table instead of creating our own? And I believe that it's a both and, right? We certainly need those who are part of dominant cultures, dominant populations who have the influence and the ability to help drive systems change so that people of color don't have to fight to have a seat at the table. It just becomes organic and natural because it's the right thing to do. There's certainly a lot of research that points to the benefits of having a broad spectrum of individuals from different experiences and backgrounds and demographics to share in a thought partnership process. But we're not all aware of those spaces where that is something that's easily attainable. And so we do have to continue to make it known that a lot of inequities still exist, a lot of disparities still exist. And in that regard, I believe that sharing that voice around that message is a part of creating the table. Now, there are some that also believe, let's not ask permission, let's create it on our own. And again, I don't think that there's really a right or wrong. I think there's a both and I think it depends on the individual. It depends on their influence, what level of boldness they have. Not everyone has the emotional capital, if you will, to be a trailblazer, and so I often say that we have to find our own path. But I do think it's important for us to, in whatever small or big way, to make sure we are impressing upon others the importance of good representation. I often share, Dakota, nothing about me without me. And when I think about that statement, what it's saying is that when you're at the table, you are representing the voice of often those who are voiceless. And so if you would imagine that all of those leaders at the table are making decisions that impact such a broad spectrum of people, if their voice is not at the table and they're being impacted, then are they going to be able to thrive? Are they going to be able to survive? And that question often is no. And so that is the importance of just making sure that we're doing all that we can to create those tables, to build those tables, to be at those tables. And sometimes that includes, a shared accountability. Certainly there's a role of those influencers who have that, ability to create that situation through their power and their privilege. But then also we have to prepare ourselves for that table, right? It means nothing to be there as a token at the table if we aren't really advancing the cause of those underserved individuals. And so, yeah, that's what I will say to that question.
I like that because, like you said, it's not one or the other. Is both can both. So like that.
Yes, both and.
Talk about how with affirmative action, something we are moving backwards. Talk about what affirmative action is and why is it important that I guess we have it based on what happened recently with the Supreme Court.
Yeah. Well, Dakota, the reversal of the affirmative action legislation has been very disheartening to so many of us, not just those who are in the space and work tirelessly to try to foster equity, belonging, but even to those who are maybe thinking about their upward mobility opportunities and their path ahead, and they are considering, now are my chances limited just because of this particular reversal of affirmative action law. And whether or not we realize it, while this right now is very specific to higher learning institutions, that is going to affect the workplace in general. So it's also going to affect corporations and other types of institutions as they think about their talent acquisition plans. And so we all should be concerned about this. It sets us back tremendously. And what I will say is that part of our showing care and concern around this topic is that we have to amplify the volume to the same extent and intensity that the naysayers and that those who believe that DEI is just a distraction, it has no value, they're speaking loudly right now. We need to match that tone. And so I think that this is the time for all of us who are champions and advocates to become even more committed to talking about the value of diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging, to help demonstrate those success stories so that people are realizing the true impact and the weight of such a decision. So now it's not the time to back down. Now is the time to go harder, to think even more strategically, to be innovative and creative in our approach to solving for getting more people bought in to the value set of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
So your book, Inclusion Uncomplicated. Talk about that, because I mean the topic is really complicated to say.
Yes. Well, that was the whole point, Dakota. Being in this space, I know that it's very complex. The work of diversity, equity, and inclusion is very complex. And I never try to sugarcoat that when I'm working with my clients. What I have found in my 20 plus years of experience being attached to this work in some capacity or another is that what keeps a lot of people on the sidelines is the perceived complexity and the reality of the complexity of this work. It's like, I don't know what to do, how to do it, what to say, what not to say. And so they sit on the sidelines and they do nothing. Inactivity is a response, and avoidance is not the right response. And so through this book, I wanted to help people to unlearn this mindset that this work cannot be attained, that this work is so complex and difficult that people can't really engage in a meaningful way. And so Inclusion Uncomplicated is just that. It's a transformative guide to help simplify the constructs of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and to help people within their own personal spheres of influence, whether it's personal or professional, to be able to help impact this work. Sometimes we feel like this work belongs to maybe solely the individuals who carry the title of Chief Diversity Officer, Manager, Leader, or even the HR professionals, but this work belongs to each of us. And I think that there's a larger population of people that believe in humanity and believe in the value of equity and inclusion, and that's who I want to appeal to. But often those individuals don't know what to do. And so this is not for the naysayers. It's not for those who have dug their heels into the sand and they've said this work is useless, right? I'm not talking to those individuals. I decided very intentionally when I was identifying my audience and writing this book that I did not want to waste my energy on a group that I felt were already pretty deeply steeped into their perceptions. Rather, I think there's a larger population of people that want to do the right thing, want to engage meaningfully. They just don't know how because of the perceived complexity.
Mm. Because if you don't know something, it's just like you want to do something, but you don't know. And then I think that's where people get paralyzed. But again, it's like you don't enact, but you are acting.
Yeah.
And then
Oh, exactly.
the status quo stay the same. And you're like, well,
Yes, exactly.
I'm looking at it, but I don't know what to do.
Exactly. We have to be willing to respectfully challenge the status quo. And so part of the premise of the book is to give people very tangible, practical skills and tactics and tools to leverage when they find themselves staring at an opportunity to help foster equity and inclusion and belonging. And so I want people to see this as a resource guide. I want when they get the book for them to, dog ear certain pages, for them to highlight certain words, for them to write in the margins and leave it on their desk to return to again and again and again. The book is equipped with some different tools to help people to engage in the learning in a much more effective way. So at the end of each chapter, I have like an infographic summary that really compiles the most salient topics from that chapter. I have what's called critical reflection moments, which gives people an opportunity to engage and process what they've read, how they feel about what they read, how they plan to apply it. And so I want this to be a tool. I was fortunate to partner with Forbes Books. Forbes is a very, popular brand name. And I was fortunate that they really stood behind my voice and how I wanted to show up with this work, because that was important to me. And I'm really just so grateful for the support that people have extended to me around the launch of Inclusion Uncomplicated.
Yeah, I saw you had a billboard at Times Square. Of course, Forbes is a big name. And yes, also in airports as well.
Yes.
Challenge, I have a question for you. For those who feel like, all right, so for me, I felt like when I was growing up, I felt like I was invisible for a certain thing. When I played basketball, for example, I wasn't good. So when people were picking players, I was either not picked or the last to be picked. So I know how it feels to feel like you aren't included. So I mean, then put on top of that, going to the workforce where you're Black, people see you, but they don't see you. It's like, man. And I guess people from who are counterpoints, they don't really experience that. If they do, it's like a different viewpoint. So I mean, for the basketball standpoint, it's like, all right, I know I'm good, but I ain't good enough. But when I come to like being a Black man, it's like I feel the same way sometimes. Am I good enough to be a person? Am I good enough because I'm not a good player, but am I good enough to be in accounting? Am I good enough to be in personal finance? You know what I'm saying? So
yeah. What you are sharing is a phenomenon that a lot of people of color experience, particularly as it relates to upward mobility in the workplace or to those, key opportunities in life to be able to better ourselves. And so imposter syndrome is real. And it tends to show up more readily into people of color because we have for so long been oppressed and we've been told that we aren't good enough, right? And so that then presents this, what I like to refer to as a self-fulfilling prophecy. That's internalized oppression. We begin to believe it and act out of it. So I think that there's work for us to do on the inner side of ourselves to really help us to overcome that thought process. Also, Dakota, what comes up for me is that as you were describing that example of not being selected as a player for someone's team from a basketball, it helps to connect the dots around belonging being something that all of us have a need for. It doesn't matter what our demographic demographics, may be, or our past experience. And I think that's important to bring to the conversation, because oftentimes when we talk about diversity, it's relegated to Black and white. And while that is an incredible dimension that we have to make sure we are centering, because people of color, particularly Black women, are the most oppressed and marginalized. And so I am always big on ensuring that I don't miss an opportunity to share that point. But getting back to belonging, it is hard for any person to show up at their best in any environment if they're always questioning whether or not they belong. Do I belong here? Am I seen? Am I valued? Am I heard? And so when we think about that, people are not showing up with their A game. So when we consider the workplace, when we consider even higher learning institutions, where part of our hope and desire is to not only learn our craft or our subject matter of concentration, but to also to learn how to navigate the complexity of difference, how to value human difference. When that's taken away from us, and because we don't feel like we can show up at our best or that we belong there, then we're not going to thrive. And so I think we have to really consider the value set of what diversity, equity, and inclusion produces from an output. And that output is belonging. Who would not want someone to feel a sense of being a part of something, right? And so for those of us who question whether or not certain populations of people belong in certain spaces, they really need to interrogate why. Why do I feel this way? And my gut tells me that once they start to unpack that, hopefully they will see that that mindset is rooted in oppression, is rooted in bigotry, is rooted in prejudice, and hopefully they're willing to try to change that mindset.
So right now I'm sitting here, I got chills because I remember a time when we lived in Tennessee. A friend of ours, my wife worked in the city of Gallatin, which is in Tennessee. Her friend was Black. She invited us to her house for dinner. And she invited one of her white coworkers too. When the white lady came, she was like, am I in the right place? Because I'm like, she felt how we feel when we go to our white event. And we're like, oh, am I in the right place?
Yes. So from a societal perspective, we have for so long been conditioned around centering whiteness that it becomes the default. So it is very jarring. And it is, something that white people feel taken aback by when they are in a predicament that we're so used to, which is showing up as the only lonelies, right? Oftentimes in spaces. And so I think that is a good experience for white people who are really on this journey of being more effective allies, being willing to get proximate to lived experiences of others who are different from them. And so I often encourage, individuals to get out of their comfort zone, to expand their network, to build up their cultural intelligence and humility by intentionally putting other folks into their circle, into their network that are different from them.
Right. Because if you don't have, let's say, your net worth is based on your network. And if you got somebody in your network who can help you propel you and they're on your team, when that bigotry or whatever prejudice comes into place, you have an ally on your team to say, back up off my guy, off my lady, whatever.
Yes.
They're here just to see like you are. Put them in place. They're skillful enough. Take care of business.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And we need more of that. And I think sometimes people are reluctant to advocate for the needs of others. And I feel that that is such a selfless way for people to help normalize equity and inclusion, is being willing to be vulnerable and to take that risk. It is seen as a risk, and sometimes it very much is a risk. But if you really believe in humanity and you believe in equity and equality, then you should be moved in some capacity or another to exercise your sources of power and privilege to be able to help someone else along the way, and to be to have a sense of belonging and a full opportunity for success. So we all need those advocates and those allies in our corner.
All right. So real quick, talk about the Minority Business Accelerator that you helped launch at the Greenville City or the Greenville Chamber of Commerce.
Yeah, I'd love to. I want to give a shout out right now to Natasha Pitts, who actually is the staff at the Greenville Chamber presently that runs the Minority Business Accelerator program. So part of the succession plan, once we reached the 10-year mark, was for me to help acclimate Natasha to the program and to how to take it to the next level. And so the cohort is doing well this year. I'm seeing a lot of stuff on social media about how the cohort is continuing to thrive. But the Minority Business Accelerator program, which is actually put on by the Greenville Chamber, it's for minority businesses throughout the upstate. And it really is to help those individuals to compete more effectively in the marketplace. They go through a year-long cohort experience where they're receiving targeted training, technical assistance. They're connected with key procurement leaders to have opportunities for contracts. They are, just provided a pathway of knowing how to work on their business instead of just always working in their business. And it's been quite successful through a partnership through Bank of America. A year ago, the organization, the Greenville Chamber, was able to take this program and expand it across the upstate. Well, not the upstate, but the full state. It was already in the upstate, but now across the full state. So there are also cohorts that take place in the Charleston area, so the Low Country, as well as in the Midlands and Columbia. And Wendell Jones, who is, very well known, also part of our leadership at the state level. He is the instructor and does a great job in just really helping those minority business leaders to realize full potential and compete effectively in the marketplace.
Awesome. So, to wrap up the interview here, what can you leave the audience with, whether it becomes DEI, being a mom, a wife, entrepreneur, just being a person? What can you leave the audience with that they can apply to their lives right away? And thank you for your time and for joining me on the Your Money Out podcast.
Yeah, no, thanks so much for having me, Dakota. I like this question because I think oftentimes when we show up to conversations like this, our identity is so wrapped up in what we do. From a profession perspective, and while my profession is deeply important to me, it does certainly blend into my personal life. There's so much more to each of us. And so I often encourage people that as we start to share about ourselves, don't just always lead with what you do, but let's also talk about some of the other aspects of our lives that humanizes us. And so, yes, I am fortunate to be a wife of 26 years and a mother of 2 adult children. I will tell you that parenting adult children has been eye-opening, is vastly different from parenting children that are in your home, right? And so I'm appreciating that journey. My husband and I are also founders of a foundation called under our names, Carlo Nika White Foundation, where we really do center commerce, community. And it's something that's really important to us. It's our way of kind of giving back. A big pillar of our foundation is to really center how in which we can help create generational wealth. That's critically important. I thought I'd mention that just from the conceptual lens in which, of course, you show up to a lot of these conversations, and of course to this podcast. But I'll leave you with this, and I encourage individuals to really take this in. I am big on normalizing Black wealth, right? It's one of the whys behind entrepreneurship for my family. And recently, the National Association of Realtors released its 2022 home buyer data for the United States, and it included all buyer breakdowns by race and ethnicity. And what I'll share, Dakota, is that the results were jarring, not surprising necessarily, but jarring in a sense that I was hopeful we had moved the needle a bit more. And I say the results were jarring because 88% of all buyers were white Caucasian, and 3% were Black or African American. And I could not let that go. I ended up writing a blog that I released, just maybe a week or so ago. And it was around the importance of home ownership as being considered a really important cornerstone and a way to help Black families realize, the benefits of home ownership. It is a wealth boosting power. Home ownership, it is a wealth boosting power. And I talk in that article about all the ways that that's realized. And I just want to draw attention to it. It is around building equity and how that's important for Black wealth. The long-term appreciation of home, buyership, that's really important. The access to affordable housing that takes place when Black households are able to access quality housing as a wealth building benefit. Community development aspects, the generational wealth transfer. And so that's something that's top of mind for me right now. And I just wanted to deposit that into the hearing of your audience, because I'm sure that's also something that's really important to you, as you also serve in this role of being a resource around wealth creation and being just smart managers of whatever type of finances are part of our responsibility.
And actually, like, I'm getting emotional because this is why I do what I do, because I know that stat right there, like, hits me hard, because it's like, that's one reason why I push so hard, because I know that African Americans don't really own homes. We don't really know about personal finances, and we don't make a lot of income. So this right here, I want to invite you for a second conversation, hopefully, because
please do.
man, like, yeah, this right here is I think this will be another conversation we can talk about in depth, because we need it as a culture, because our counterparts, they get it, but us, we're like behind.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for the work that you're doing, and for the message and the leadership role that you play in helping others to be much more knowledgeable about pathways for financial security.
Thank you. So, Nika, how can people find out about you online, social media, and your website, please?
Yes. And so my website is nikawhite.com. I also have a speaker website, which is nikawhitespeaks.com. And through both of those sources, you can find ways to connect with me, including through all of my social media platforms. And so we'll love to be in conversation with any of you. Also, just want to share that for those who may be interested in my latest book, Inclusion Uncomplicated, as we talked about before, it is available in an audiobook. It's available on Kindle, and of course available in the hard copy, anywhere where you like to get your books. And I would love it to be in conversation with anyone who picks it up, reads it, and would like to just kind of process what you're learning.
All right, thanks for your time, Dr. White.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Take great care.
You're welcome. And this is the Your Money Hour podcast.